Hello, guys. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia, and I welcome you all to a brand new week, fresh discussion and everything. I have to apologize to our viewers on YouTube. The last two podcasts have been audio only. We're in process of also getting those files on YouTube. That's my bad, and we'll get them on it. But we're back to doing video podcasts, and we're back to doing the type of podcast you absolutely love, which is hardcore political podcast. And with me, I have the perfect guest for it, columnist, author, I would also say poet, because I know he writes a lot of, and fellow caffeine lover, Avatans Kumar, joining me from a very cold morning in Chicago. How are you, Avatans?
Namaste. I'm good. Thank you. Thanks
And
for having me on the show.
And Avatans and I've interacted so many times, I never even realized this is his first Mind Podcast appearance or something. And I mean, may this be a series of many more to come in the weeks to come. So we want.
Absolutely. I mean, this is
Sorry,
Der Hai Durust hai.
there I durust hai.
Der Hai Durust hai.
And one part of Avatans' identity that I deliberately did not introduce was that he's a Bihari, right? And who better to get a Bihari voice who has been writing and observing Bihar politics for the last 2-3 decades almost to talk about the elections in Bihar, because this is a very watershed moment in the history of Bihar. Lalu Prasad Yadav, the three huge leaders of Bihar, or four huge leaders if you count Sushil Modi, through the late last 15 years were Ram Vilas Paswan, Nitish Kumar, Sushil Modi, Lalu Prasad Yadav. Lalu is in jail. Nitish Kumar is in a very weakened sort of political state. His political capital has considerably diminished compared to what it was in 2009. Ram Vilas Paswan unfortunately passed away a few days ago, and Sushil Modi was the deputy CM of Nitish Kumar, seen a very familiar BJP voice. But are we also going to see a change of guard where BJP starts projecting newer faces as the CM candidates? So it could happen that an era of Bihar politics is coming to an end with this election, and maybe next election might be all new faces. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about a little bit about the legacy of Ram Vilas Paswan, because Avtans wrote a fantastic piece on Ram Vilas Paswan. One of the most, the weather vanes of Indian politics is a very lazy description, because he is a weather vane, but he is also probably someone who had the foresight to know which way the wind was blowing, right? So that was the thing, which now that I think about it, is a definition of a weather vane, but we'll discuss why I said he was a little bit more than weather vane. And the last part, because we are getting close to the business end of the US elections with 2 weeks to go. So every single podcast that we talk about, even though we pick up other issues, we will have a segment on the American elections. So it's going to be a good 40 minutes of discussion. And I'll leave the floor to Avtans first. Can you give us our listeners, viewers, a brief overview of what to look out in Bihar elections? Where do you think it's heading? And how will the next month go?
Once again, Adit Bhai, thank you for having me on your show. And it's an absolute pleasure. Like I said, Der Hai Durust hai. And hopefully we will continue with this kind of dialogue in future. I'm a Bihari, born and raised in Patna. So I'm a Khati Bihari. Kati Patania. Very much rooted there. We still have our family house there, and my parents used to live there until not too long ago, until they became old age caught up with them, and then they're living with my younger brothers in Delhi area. Mm-hmm. So otherwise, I used to go every time I would go to India, I would go to Patna straight away. So I'm very much connected with Patna, and Patna has been my karm bhumi for a long while. Mm-hmm. So that said, there are lots of unknowns in this election as far as Bihar is concerned. Mm-hmm. First, one of the biggest thing is that we are in Bihar, this is one of the biggest election going on in the midst of pandemic. I mean, we can talk about New Zealand election, but New Zealand is 4.8 million people, the whole country. Bihar is about 99 million. Patna itself is about 2 million. So you can get the scale of the election that we are going through. And you have to give the Prime Minister Modi credit for not postponing. He had an option of having
and he was in government. So
absolutely.
it was not like he was in opposition, and he was in government. They could have actually ruled the state for 6 more months, and no one would have complained per se.
Right, and then that says a lot about the character of Prime Minister Modi. I mean, New Zealand Prime Minister did postpone the election initially. So I'm just bringing it for perspective here. So it is a lot of unknowns, and that's one of the first one. And like you rightly mentioned earlier, and we'll talk about that a little later, as you said, Ram Vilas Paswan, he has been one of the stambha of Bihar politics for a long time. I mean, since, let's say, 1977. So, and like you say, weather man, and I remember Dharmyug एक पत्रिका आती थी हिंदी में बहुत पहले. So in that there was a poem long time ago, and it basically said that Ram Vilas Paswan is a kind of politician जो कि हमेशा बैटिंग टीम में रहते हैं, जो क्रिकेट के मैच में हमेशा बैटिंग टीम पे रहते हैं, और जब उनका फील्डिंग का टाइम आता है तो वो फिर से बैटिंग टीम में शामिल हो जाते हैं. So some Vyangakar had written a Hindi poem on that. So that's another factor. And the third factor is Laluji, as you mentioned, is not on the scene. That makes the situation all the more very interesting, because this is for the first time in, let's say, since the late 70s, 80s, when Lalu Yadav is not on the political scene campaigning and all that. So that's that puts a very interesting twist on the Bihar election.
So to give our listeners just some perspective, there are 243 Vidhan Sabha seats in Bihar, and they need about 122 for a simple majority. If I were to just tell, BJP and JDU last time had a very big, I think JDU had about 78 or so sort of seats, and BJP had about 658, if I'm not mistaken, and the by-elections could have changed the thing. Now, one thing to remember is last time JDU fought in an alliance with Lalu Prasad RJD and Congress, and BJP fought in an alliance with Ram Vilas Paswan and Upendra Kushwaha and others.
And Jitaram
Manji, yes, Hindustani Awami Morcha. Yeah. How I remember, my podcast listeners will know that I am a treasure trove of bizarre facts that no one gives a damn about. But yeah, Hindustani Awami Morcha, now he's on the side of Lalu, I think, because he wants...
no.
Back to Nitish now.
Yes, he's in India.
Sorry,
he's in India.
He was with Lalu about 2 years ago.
Yeah, right.
For 2019 elections. I'm sorry. That's
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Upendra Kushwaha is not in NDA though.
No, he's not.
And LJP is not in NDA. Ram Vilas Paswan, of course, was the only minister, but unfortunately he passed away. So the split is complete. But Chirag Paswan sometimes, I think, praises Narendra Modi more publicly than even some of the JDU leaders do. And JDU is an official alliance. So it's a very interesting contest where JDU is fighting LJP, RJD, and Congress on the seats it is contesting. But BJP is not fighting LJP. BJP is only fighting Congress and that. And ultimately, the debate right now here is, what if BJP overtakes JDU to become the single largest party? Will that mean that Amit Shah has said that Nitish will still be the CM of Bihar? But who knows 3 years from now?
Right. And as things stands now, I think BJP is contesting 120 seats or 21 seats, just 1 or 2 seats less than our JDU.
Right.
Okay, so even if they did all the seats, they will still need somebody to form a government.
Right.
Okay, but that's very interesting. What you said is Chirag Paswan, the inheritor of Ram Vilas Paswanji's legacy now, the LJP, that is part of NDA in center, but not part of NDA in Bihar. They are contesting elections separately, but there is a kink to it,
Yeah.
right? But they are not fielding candidates against BJP. Okay. And they are fielding candidates pretty much everywhere where JDU is available.
Absolutely.
So that will be very interesting. And I think I have some kind of a breakdown here where let's see, just so BJP versus RJD, the contest is 61. They are fighting each other on 61 seats. Like you said, we have 243 or something like that. BJP versus Congress is 37 seats.
Okay.
BJP versus CPI ML is 8 seats. BJP versus CPI is 3. And CPM is 1.
Wow.
CPI ML is Marxist Leninist.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. There are too many. JDU versus RJD is 71.
So I'll let you finish and then I'll complete. Go on.
Okay.
Go on. Yeah,
okay. So just quickly, yeah. So
take your time.
JDU versus RJD is 71. JDU versus Congress is 20. JDU versus CPI ML is 10. JDU versus CPI is 3, and JDU versus CPM is 3.
Yeah.
Okay, and where is that? LJP. Okay, so you can see this is the breakdown, and wherever JDU is contesting, LJP is there too.
Lovely. So this is fascinating, and what I was trying to say is there are more factions of CPI in India than the number of seats that they actually win in the parliament.
Yes. I think they are on the verge of being de-recognized as national party.
I mean,
right?
Yeah, one would say that's 15 years too late, but maybe sure, maybe not 15. Let's say 10 years too late, because 2004 they did end up winning a few seats.
Right.
But since then the decline has been very clear. So do you think people like Kanhaiya Kumar and all are going to campaign quite vociferously in support of the alliance or something, or are they only going to limit people like Kanhaiya Kumar in his seats, in the CPI seats?
I don't see Kanhaiya Kumar making any impact in Bihar.
No. Let me qualify my question. I absolutely agree with that. I don't think he's relevant at all. But still, since him campaigning makes news in Delhi, do you think he's going to use him as a campaigner?
I don't know. Maybe CPIML will do, but the RJD last time, if I remember correctly, they didn't allow him to campaign. Actually, they put a candidate against him, right?
Yeah.
He came in third.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So all these people are.
I forget who.
Yeah. Chirag Singh won, and RJD was the second, and Kanhaiya was third. But Bihar politics is so complex, and it defies every logic and every kind of projection and those kind of things that you make. What it boils down to, nobody knows. People used to say that, caste politics. But if you look at the 2019 election, that didn't work out as much as people thought. One of the very knowledgeable ex-journalist friend of mine, I was talking to him the other day, and he mentioned that the new factor that has emerged in Bihar politics is the electoral gender divide that he calls. Gender divide. So not the caste divide and not the religious divide, or if they are very insignificant now. But he is saying that gender divide.
Mhm.
Female ladies are voting more
Mhm.
and voting more emphatically, and sometimes voting differently than their male counterparts.
Mhm.
It was pretty obvious. In general, we saw last 2019 election,
Mhm.
women participation was kind of, I think, if I'm not wrong, it was all-time high in all India level.
Mhm.
And Bihar was not an exception on that either.
Right.
So and there are reasons for that. One of the reason is people don't like prohibition in general, male counterparts,
Mhm.
but it is a very popular thing among women,
Mhm.
and there are not just the economic, and there are multiple factors affecting that.
Mhm.
Uh, that decision by women,
Mhm.
that they like the prohibition overall because it gives them a lot of flexibility,
Mhm.
societally, socially, economically as well, and independence and empowerment as well.
Mhm.
Um, some of the schemes of the prime minister, like Ujjwala and the light, the bijli, and all that, that has changed tremendously the lifestyle and the of women folks in India.
Mhm.
Uh, People have gas cylinder and things like that. So that has changed the total demographics of people who vote. And obviously, we have the young people.
Mhm.
So that will be a big uh, factor
Correct.
to see how वो ऊंट कैसे बैठता है वो देखना पड़ेगा. That will be a
Absolutely.
X factor. And
Absolutely.
also, one of the factors is a lot of people who came back during pandemic from wherever they were working. Not everybody's
Mhm.
back to the work,
Mhm.
and they are there, and what impact they will have on the
Mhm.
election. So those are some of the unknowns that I was talking about in the beginning.
Mhm. No, absolutely. So, but let's get to the whole sort of Tejasvi debate, right? So, Lalu's
Mhm,
legacy is now being because the reason why we are even having this discussion is most people are saying that the Bihar election is not completely done and dusted, and Nitish is facing some sort of anti-incumbency. Now, again,
mhm,
except for 2 years, where Jitaram Manjhi was the CM of Bihar from or 2.5, 1.5, I think, from 2014 to 2015. Um,
mhm,
Nitish has virtually ruled Bihar from 2005 October to
mhm,
2020 December,
mhm,
and
mhm,
if he wins
mhm.
5 more years, so 13 and a half years of rule and 15 years of JDU rule, two without BJP, 13 with BJP. What do you reckon is happening? Like, what do you think there is anti incumbency at district level, or do you think there is some sort of a fatigue factor with the ministers also? Because there are leaders and ministers that they have repeatedly seen.
In my deliberations with my friends and family, I have
Hmm.
a lot of family in Bihar and all over.
Correct.
See, there is incumbency factor always, but now you have to compare what you had 5, 10 years ago
Hmm.
to what you have now. How far we have come, how
Hmm.
far Bihar has come over a period of time when you know it shames me to say that the law and order did not exist.
Hmm.
You know, kidnapping was an industry.
Hmm.
I mean, the irony of it, that was the main industry in Bihar where you can make money by kidnapping people. People had marrying age boys, they would send out
Hmm.
so that they don't kidnap and marry them.
Hmm.
Those kind of things,
Yeah.
and forget about the migration uh, to outside of Bihar for education and jobs and
Right.
things like that.
Hmm.
So from there, we have made a big stride. Are we perfect? No, probably not. Definitely not, I would
Yeah.
say. But two factors have definitely increased. One is the law and order. It's not perfect, but it's much better because you have to compare from what you are voting for.
Hmm.
And and we saw a glimpse of it when RJD was in power back again for a short period of time.
Hmm.
So it was back to square one. So Nitish, for his credit, he has curtailed crime and those kind of things
And the
very well.
benchmark has shifted, right? So
Yeah.
and now it's similar to the situation that I always talk to people in Gujarat about, that a Gujarati who has been voting since the last election, since 2017, has not actually been in a non-BJP government in Gujarat, because the last Congress government was 97. And from 98 to 2017, which is 19 years and now more, is been BJP. So in Bihar too, the first time voters of this time would have been 3 or 4 when Nitish became the first the CM. So they don't remember.
Absolutely.
Even someone who was like a 6 or 7, right? Because I
Mm-hmm.
know 2000 to 2005 was also a jungle raj, but 95 to 2000 was absolutely horrendous. Like those 5 years
Yeah.
when you had 2.5 years of Lalu and 2.5 years of Rabadi after he had to resign over the fodder scam, was absolutely awful in Bihar in terms of security. So that is a thing. I remember people would tell me that they would not go out to movies and watch the shows after 6 p.m. Is that true? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it is very true. I mean, people will never go to a night show,
Yeah.
the 9 p.m. show. There's no, I mean, the shopping places used to be closed, and
My dad
there
would
was
tell me,
nobody. Yeah.
that he had to travel in the 90s through parts of Bihar, and his agents would come to pick him up for business, like, the local agent. And he's like, if it was after 4:30, 5 o'clock, wo katta leke hi aata tha. He's like, not for anything else, but if someone tried to rob him at the railway station while he was waiting, he had some sort of an arm protection. So
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
is how bad it was.
It was.
Situation
It
was
was.
30 years
Yeah.
ago.
And,
Right.
yeah. And the other factor, in some improvement in infrastructure also. I mean, not some, I would say, I would argue a great improvement in infrastructure. Some of it is directly related to center, like bijli, gas, and all. But let's say road, I remember there was a time when Sri Lalu ji used to say कि बिहार के सड़क को तो हम एकदम हेमा मालिनी के गाल जैसा बना देंगे.
Right, exactly.
So I mean, so
No,
that was a factor.
no, you are only talking about half the statement. He also made another half statement on Om Puri, but I'm not going to repeat
Yes.
that because
Right.
I'm a fan
Right.
of Om Puri, and it was a very offensive
Right.
statement what he made.
Right.
But Avatans knows
Right.
what I'm talking
But
about.
right. Yeah. But that says a lot about the situation at that time. That even Lalu ji wanted to make Bihar ki sadak Himamal ke gaal jaisa. Now it has improved a lot. There are network has improved. The quality of roads have improved, and that says a lot about the Nitish Kumar government.
Absolutely. But so coming to the last part, and then we'll go to the legacy of Ram Vilas Paswan. If elections were to be held today, do you think the NDA will come to power, or do you think they will struggle to come to power?
I think NDA will come to power. I think NDA will sail through easily. The most speculation that is going on in people are talking about is what after, will it be Nitish ji? Because remember, JDU doesn't have a minister. It's an NDA partner, but in center they don't have a minister. So, and also talking to some of the people on the ground, I can say that they are looking for some change of face in leadership, people on the ground as well. And knowing the working style of Prime Minister Modi and Amit Shah, where they have always sprung new faces as surprise as chief ministers, in case BJP gets the most numbers of seats, I have a feeling that we will see a surprise as a new. I think so.
So,
And Nitish ji may, decide that it's like had enough. I mean,
so I have a
what can you do
conspiracy
after
theory.
15 years?
No, no, no.
What can you do after 15 years of being the chief minister of
I have a
Bihar?
conspiracy theory
What
because right
else?
now there is no NDA minister in the center except for Ramdas Athavale, who really doesn't have any seats in the Lok Sabha because he's
Hmm.
only in the Rajya
Hmm.
Sabha, right?
Hmm.
Union minister. Do you think there is a chance if in case what's his name Nitish comes close to power, has 15-20 seats less than BJP, then BJP says, okay, we make our guy the chief minister, but we'll give you a very plump portfolio as the cabinet minister in center, but then that would mean he would have to work under the cabinet of Narendra Modi. So do you think
Yeah.
that is possible or that is not possible?
Well, well, like they say, in politics, everything is possible. After all, इतना preface बना के नहीं करेंगे, stage पे नहीं बैठेंगे, and he's there with Narendra Modi. So,
Correct.
you know,
Who knows?
that much we have to say. Who
No, no,
knows? Who
absolutely.
knows?
Ultimately, he's
Yeah.
there. But I'm saying this is a conspiracy theory. But in conclusion, I think I tend to align myself with Avatans. I think it is very unlikely to see NDA losing power. What is more
Yes.
likely to happen is because of the LJP factor, now you have the trifecta in the race, especially in certain districts around Hajipur, Jamui, all those areas where LJP is strong. About 35-40 seats where LJP can actually make an impact. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm being a little conservative. Maybe it's 25-30, but basically that's the number. And if they can, and if that is the difference by which Nitish actually doesn't get to become the single largest party, that's sort of the wild card. So if you really want me to tell you in one line what numbers am I going to look at Bihar, I will not be looking NDA versus UPA because I think NDA will win. I will be looking at NDA versus NDA. Who will get more seats, BJP or JDU? And
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
the election.
I kind of agree with you.
Yeah.
I kind of agree with you on that. But let me ask you one question.
Dangerous. Dangerous. Tell me.
So if if BJP does do a lot better than JDU, do you think Sushil Modi will be the face?
I doubt it.
Okay.
Because he's
I
perceived
think we are on the same wavelength.
He's perceived to be too close to Nitish Kumar, and if it's a BJP Raj or something, I think it will be something. So Nityanand Rai is an interesting option because he's a Yadav face, if I'm not mistaken, and that would also counter some of the Lalu votes because a lot of those Lalu votes, the Yadav OBC votes, some part of it came to BJP in the Lok Sabha because they saw BJP as a better. I mean, otherwise Ram Kripal Yadav would not have won the way he did from Pataliputra.
Yeah, that brings an important aspect of this election that that we haven't talked about is that if we have a new phase from BJP, who, and if that who is again a big question, will that be from OBC or upper caste? I mean, you cannot take the caste out of Jati out of Bihar politics that easily. But again, knowing the working style of Prime Minister Modi, you never know. But you have to make that calculation as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's not two. Yeah.
So that's the thing. But you also think there'll be another phase in Bihar, like a new phase?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that's a good point to which end I'm just looking at the Bihar numbers, like when the counting is happening, it's going to be in December. Maybe Avatans and I will do another podcast before when we get the opinion polls and stuff, and we'll certainly bring you the analysis and the results. And there'll be a panel, we'll get Shwetank and all that. It's going to be a fun discussion. So it's going to be
absolutely.
Yeah, and last time Avatans and Shwetank went head to head with their 2019 Lok Sabha numbers. I want to see them go head to head with their Bihar numbers and see. I'm not.
We were pretty close.
They both beat me on that.
Yes, we were both. Shwetank Bhai was almost perfect.
Almost
I was
perfect.
A few numbers off, but I would say it was okay. It was pretty good.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah.
So second part of the podcast. 2005. So there are three major events I would like to quote. One is 2002, where Ram Vilas Paswan was a sitting minister in the Vajpayee government and then quit the government, joined the UPA a year later. In 2004, he gets 5-6 seats on his own and becomes the CM becomes a cabinet minister in the Sonia Gandhi government. Come to 2005, February, where
Manmohan Singh government.
Manmohan Singh, I mean, sorry for the faux pas.
I mean, yeah.
But technically, UPA was the Sonia Gandhi government since he was the chairperson. Yes. But you're right. Glad for the correction. Yes. But वो song क्या है कि समझने वाले समझ गए ना समझे वो अनाड़ी है.
वो अनाड़ी है.
Yep. So yes. Coming to February 2005, the Bihar elections happened. The NDA is just short of a majority, and the UPA is a little short of the NDA, but Ram Vilas Paswan gets about 29 to 30 seats. And he is in the position of kingmaker. Rather than supporting the UPA, with whom he was in alliance in the Lok Sabha, he decides that I'm going to count my horses and get like probably 40 seats in the next election and go. He waits for 6 months. And then BJP and JDU come storm back to power, even though the governor tried to do what he did. But anyways, he came to power and Ram Vilas Paswan was ousted from the Bihar politics. 2009 Lok Sabha elections is probably the first time he picked a losing side, where he was defeated by an 89-year-old Ram Sundar Das from Hajipur. Yes. And the first time he lost his seat. But then something incredible happens in 2013. Burying the hatchet with the BJP, he is one of the first people to rejoin the NDA and almost sort of creates a flutter that the weather vane has pointed towards Narendra Modi. Are we missing, to see the larger picture? And he was proven right. He got 6 out of 7 seats that he contested, the highest he's ever got. Like my joke was, Ram Vilas Paswan by himself got more seats than Samajwadi Party and Bahujan Samaj Party combined in 2014. Right. And
right.
And then he becomes the cabinet minister, and of course from there you have here. But before that, I'm going to go to Avatans and to talk a bit about his 90s avatar. So how do you view Ram Vilas Paswan?
See, Ram Vilas Paswan came up on the scene in 1977, during Janta time, Janta Party time. And I remember I was not even 10 at that time, but I remember hearing his name. Hajipur, I have lots of my family members from my dad's side live in Hajipur. So we used to go to Hajipur very often and have a close connection with Hajipur. And I remember hearing this Ram Vilas Paswan, who was in jail during the emergency, pretty much the entire time he was in jail. He was part of the JP movement, and just like other young Turks at that time, you can say even Laluji was part of that movement. And Laluji lived not too far away from where I grew up. So I know exactly, so, he wins the election. I mean, I'm sure, definitely it was a big Janta wave, but to win on those days of more than 4 lakh votes, he got 90% of the votes.
Really?
And at that time, he got close to 99 something percent of vote he got at that time. And I remember that was the some kind of record. So that's when he came up on the scene. And then, then like you said, he never weathered away, never went away. He was there. He was always relevant, and he always picked the right side at the right time. And people call him a weatherman for nothing. And people call him weatherman not for nothing. So, yeah. But he, for whatever his political capital that he carried, you can call it, maybe sometimes it was cosmetic, because for being Dalit, he carried some weight, and he never became irrelevant. And he was young.
That is the most incredible part. For someone who has always never been gone more than 5 or 6 seats in Lok Sabha, 30-40 MLA seats, he was never out. He had his core support. So, I mean, even Mayawati, the enigmatic Mayawati was reduced to 0 seats, but they could not reduce Paswan to 0.
To 0. Yeah. And
I mean,
you have to give.
They did once in 2009, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
Right. And you have to give him credit because it's not that, people, it's not that he was from a dynasty or anything, from a big family or anything. He came up from his own. And I remember reading about him somewhere that he made it to the Bihar police. He took a Bihar Public Service Commission exam that recruits DSP or something like that, those kind of posts.
Right.
So he was selected in that, and I think he had tweeted some time ago, and he said that, one of my friends asked me, "Kya government mein banenge ya servant banenge?" Yeah, I think it's 1969 sometime. And then he says that's when I decided I want to be the government, not the government servant.
And who would have thought the person who was the perennial weather vane of Indian politics would become the closest ally of Narendra Modi post 2013? I mean, the Shiv Sena and the Akali Dal moved out, but the LJP, that is the most incredible part.
Right. And I also know people who have worked with him very closely, not as a politician, but as a bureaucrat. One of my closest friends worked with him in the food processing department, FCI, not food processing, Food Corporation of India, FCI. And, he's all praise for him that he is a very grounded person as a politician. He is very thoughtful also. He was very thoughtful also. And he took care of his people very well.
Interesting. Very interesting legacy. I think
yes.
we must say that may his family be very may God give him strength to overcome this loss and stuff.
Absolutely.
And prayers for
absolutely.
So any politician, I have a lot of disagreements with him.
Yes,
of course, the whole concept of the vote bank politics and what him and Lalu did in 2009, the way they campaigned was quite pathetic. He came back sort of to his origins after they completely lost the election, because they had somehow thought that we'll make this Muslim Dalit Yadav vote bank to break and play up the caste divisions and the religious lines and pander to the Muslims and stuff, the extremists, and kind of that did leave a dink on his career. He realized though that that's not how his future was going to work, so he took a completely different line in 2013, and his son seems to be following on it. That where if the politics is back to an identity politics or positive identity politics rather than a negative identity politics, that rather than me being against this, I'm pro this, right? And that is the sort of difference. Again, I'm not complimenting or criticizing or whatever. I'm not a fan of it, but that's just my analysis of what has happened.
And then something to be said about his character is the way he raised his child also. I mean, you see the class difference between Chirag and let's say some other of his compatriots,
Chirag does seem to have a connect with the, so that's what I'm very intrigued to see, that a lot of people
and compare him with some other people in Bihar.
Oh yeah, I mean, look at him.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. So he did something
good.
And
I'm not even going to go to Tej Pratap.
Hari bol, Hari bol.
Hari bol, Hari bol. Exactly. Yes. But just look up Tej Pratap, the pictures online, and you'll know what we are talking about. So, Chirag Paswan, though, a lot of people suggested why doesn't he merge with the BJP, but I think he's trying to test out his mettle to see if there is. Ultimately, we might see that happening with that merger with BJP or something. But right now, I think it's a test of mettle, and rather do it now when Nitish is the face, rather than 4 years from now when Modi is the face. So that's
Yeah.
the sort of discussion. Yeah, sorry, Avatans, go on.
No, I was just going to say that he's very articulate and all that, but is he a Ram Vilas Paswan?
Yeah.
We don't know, and I have doubts.
Mm-hmm.
He may have get some sympathy votes right now, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think he's there like Ram Vilas Paswan, at least not yet.
Maybe he's not there yet, but whether he gets
Not
there
there yet.
remains to be
Yeah,
seen. So
right, absolutely.
perfect. Perfect time to wrap up the Bihar edition of the podcast. And in our last edition,
Mhm.
we go to the Illinois, Texas edition of the podcast and try to look at the US elections. I'm going to do a shameless plug here because so many people have asked me about Indian American votes. I saw Sadanand Dhume write an awful piece on based on Milan Vaishnav's survey. The reason I say is an awful piece is I've written a Twitter thread. Please go and talk. Apart from baseless name calling, where he called my analysis navel gazing, he couldn't rebut the specific point I said. And I understand because folks like Dhume and all who are in DC refuse to take on their friends who are in different foundations who publish these surveys. So I don't think he could publicly ask even one question on Milan's survey, and so much for freedom of expression, right? Because Dhume's piece starts with saying the most Indian Americans are in California, Pennsylvania, or basically New York, New Jersey, California, Pennsylvania, Texas. And he's like, and you have to look at the Indian Americans elsewhere. Now, my point was that you say this, but your survey actually talks about more than half the respondents are, or around half the respondents are from California, Texas, Jersey, New York. And even in Texas, although it's a Republican state, the urban cities do tend to vote Democratic. So isn't this survey just over-representing the Democratic hold? And it may be, there might be a 70-30 divide, but you have to really look at the survey in swing states. So he's like, oh, Indians are in less percent, it won't matter. And I'm like, guys, Indians are within the margin of victory in Michigan, Wisconsin, Florida. Wouldn't that matter?
Yes.
Of course, he didn't have a single response to this because, again,
Right.
that would be questioning his friend's numbers, which he didn't want to do.
Right.
So,
Right.
so that's my thing. So, Avatans, where do you see this happening, going?
See, like in national surveys, people, if you look at the 2016 election, right, going well late into the night of the election day itself, we knew that Hillary Clinton was going to win with 90% or more chances of winning, right?
Right.
And so that tells you people that they were talking to, either they were not talking to the right people, or the people that they were talking to were not telling the truth.
Yeah.
Right.
Or
And
not
this,
what they should hear. They were telling them what they wanted to hear.
Yeah. And I think that situation, in my opinion, has perpetuated even further in the worst, in the negative direction, because of the cancel culture and the personal fear for personal and professional harm, where if you wear MAGA hat, you'll be fired, for example. So people are not. A lot of people are not telling. I'm not suggesting by any means that I know what the outcome will be, but I'm just questioning, just like you are questioning that survey. That is not a very indicative of how the things are. Like I always say, I mean, they can win all. They can win. The Democrats can win California and New York with 100% vote. It doesn't matter. It will boil down to Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and some of the other battleground states.
Absolutely. But I'll tell you this, right? I'll tell you this, Avatans, that the real debate right now is whether Trump can even get to that margin of error, or not margin of error, margin which actually makes Indian Americans a relevant voting bloc. If Trump does not get to within 1% of Biden in Pennsylvania, Florida, Michigan, and Wisconsin, the whole debate on the Indian American vote is useless. Right now, what it seems like, based on the polls, he's struggling to get there. Now, I agree with what you're saying that the pollsters might not be, I mean, they are taking 2016 into account, but are people actually telling how they're going to vote? Because a lot of statements that Trump is making are, quite frankly, indefensible and insane, right? And a lot of people who are voting for him are not saying so publicly. because
Mm-hmm.
if that does happen, they have to sort of say, like, they would have to defend, okay, why are we voting for Trump and stuff, because sometimes it's
Right.
purely selfish reasons that it's a corporate who owns
Yeah.
the business and he likes the low taxes against in the Trump era, and he honestly uh, isn't affected by the other social issues which do affect millions and millions of people. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with that. That's just my analysis of why people are refusing to say. So I think that, but the craziest part this election is that there is a chance that it might not be decided on election night, and it might go on for days, because if the mail-in ballots, the numbers that are coming through, and if they take hours and hours to count or days and days to count, that's just going to put America in a very precarious situation. And
Mm-hmm.
because you have two passionate sets of supporters who have had a
Mm-hmm.
very violent year, even though because of the pandemic, over various issues and stuff. And I just hope and pray that whatever mandate it is decisive, and it's not so indecisive and stuff. One thing that might be an advantage for Joe Biden is the early voting seems to be in large numbers. And history
Mm-hmm.
has shown that whenever the voting percentage is heavy, usually it has favored the Democrats because of the number of
Yeah.
votes. Because the last time, the maximum in the last 6 elections, if I were to say, the maximum votes that a Republican got was last time Donald Trump with about 62.5 million. And the maximum votes
Mm-hmm.
that a Democrat got was 69.5 million in uh, in the Obama era in 2008. So if Joe Biden were to get anywhere close to that, or maybe even 2-3 million more than that, then the lead is just too huge for Trump to even
Mm-hmm.
overcome, in spite of the Electoral College. So that's my analysis. What do you think?
Uh, First of all, I don't think that anyone can match the number of Obama voting.
Yeah.
People were overexcited. People who never vote for Democrat did vote for Obama.
Mm.
There are a lot of people who voted. So I don't think we can reach as an electorate. Democrat will not get those many votes.
Mm-hmm.
It may still be more than what the popular vote that President Trump gets, but it's not going to reach because Obama was his organization, his level of groundwork and get out the vote and
Mm-hmm.
from all elements, and his coalition that he created was absolutely fantastic,
Mm.
and people were genuinely excited about the change in leadership and the look and everything. And so
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we can match that,
Mm.
in my opinion. But like you said, it will probably end up being Biden.
Exactly. That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
But before we
Yeah.
end the podcast, and again, the election is by no means over. October surprise.
Mhm.
Who knows what might happen in 2 weeks? Um,
Yeah.
we do recommendations, non-political.
Hmm.
Could be poems, could be movies, could be shows for all our listeners. So,
Okay.
Avatans, any recommendations that you have for our listeners this week for them to watch, listen to, hear?
Oh, listen to. Can I talk about book?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. So because I'm reading this book right now,
Mm.
by Harsh and
Harshan,
Rajiv.
yes.
So I'm close to 100 pages, so I have to read. I'm reading some more.
Mhm.
And I have another book that I just received, which is this one from Aditi
Aadit
Banerjee.
Kapadia. Right, right.
Yes, that's next on my list. So
Absolutely.
uh, these are two of the books that I'm
So we just
reading right now.
for our listeners on Mind, we just published a review by Dr. Mukul Asher
Yeah,
of
yeah, I
Harshan
saw that.
Rajiv's book. Terrific
Yeah,
book, terrific review. We may have a discussion with Harshan Rajiv too going forward about this book, and Aditi's book too. Do read. Terrific
yeah,
recommendation.
yeah, yeah,
My
yeah.
recommendation is going to be a show that I watched. So for fans of The West Wing, Aaron Sorkin and Tommy Schlamme created a reimagined version of The West Wing. Basically, they reenacted a West Wing in a theater and treated it as a play with the old star cast coming back. They are 20 years older, but the firepower is the same. And it was, of course,
Mm-hmm.
to encourage more people out to vote and stuff. But to see Martin Sheen, Rob Lowe, Richard Schiff out,
Yeah.
it's on HBO, outstanding. and Aaron Sorkin has come up with a. Oh, sorry. Actually, I wouldn't. I'll watch the film later. There's another show I would like to recommend called Scam 1992 by Hansal Mehta. It's on the Harshad Mehta scam, and
Oh, okay.
I have to say one thing. I have to give them credit for getting all the characters of the 90s pitch perfect. Like you include the fictional Guru Chandraswamy or George Fernandez is an MP who's
Fernandez.
secretly helping Sucheta Dalal. They don't say it, but there is only one MP from Bihar who wears a certain spectacles and was wearing his crumpled khaki shirt in the 90s and who raised legitimate questions and stuff. So,
Always spoke Hindi.
yeah,
George.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
what a
Not
character.
is a Kannadiga.
अच्छा
Yeah.
ये मैंने एक तार दबा दी है इफ रामविलास पासवान के बारे में अवतंस को टॉक अबाउट एन आवर जॉर्ज फर्नांडिस के लिए वी वुड नीड 3 matinee shows 3 to 6 9 to
Yeah.
12 12 to
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
both him and I could go but it's a
Yeah.
George Fernandez only comes for a bit but still it's an interesting show again you must watch it for how India was during the 90s and one of my favorite Gujarati film actors Pratik Gandhi plays Harshad Mehta and he's so outstanding because he's not appreciated as much in Hindi cinema and now this is going to be his leapfrog and I feel bad for Abhishek Bachchan who's coming with a film where he also plays Harshad Mehta. I don't think he can get that Gujarati accent, that Mumbaiya thing, because Pratik Gandhi happens to be from the same background. And what they have done is they have cast a lot of Gujarati theater actors in very pivotal roles because it's not people speaking in a fake accent. It's actually people knowing how to get the character. And that's what makes the show so good. So do watch it.
Excellent.
But,
I still remember Harshad Mehta. I don't know if a lot of people,
please
younger
talk a little bit
people,
about
will.
it.
I don't remember a lot. I just remember in India Today or one of those magazines, he was on the front page with his extravagant car.
With his
Lexus. That's what I remember.
So that
Lexus. There you go.
That happens to be in the show as well because he got the first Lexus in India, and I think it was
India. Yeah.
Business Today or Business Standard, either one of those.
Yeah.
And with his suit,
I don't
tie,
remember.
and like hand put on his Lexus.
Yeah. I remember that.
Fascinating character. Do read about him and stuff like that. But thank you so much, Avatans, for joining. This has been a truly terrific podcast. We hope to do many more with you going soon.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute pleasure and delight.
Absolutely, and for our listeners, do like our Facebook page, to follow us on Twitter. We'll be back soon with many more episodes with Avatans. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.